let's start with Afghanistan and General Milley. He's been under cross-examination for, among other things, calling his Chinese counterpart while President Trump was still president and allegedly assuring him that the U.S. was not about to attack China. And then going on to say, if we are going to attack you, this is the allegation in the Bob Costas book, I will give you a heads up. And there was a lot of back and forth about that yesterday, saying that's insane. If you did that, that could potentially be treasonous, on and on it went. And he made 2 points. Number one, he said, I told Mike Pompeo after this happened, the then Secretary of State, about that call. There was nothing inappropriate about it. And to prove it, I can tell you I went to the Secretary of State and told him about it. And secondly, he tried to clarify what exactly that exchange sounded like. Let me get to him saying you knew all about it. Listen.
On 31 December, the Chinese requested another call with me. The Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Asia Pacific Policy helped coordinate my call, which was then scheduled for 8 January, and he made a preliminary call on 6 January. 11 people attended that call with me, and readouts of this call were distributed to the interagency that same day. Shortly after my call ended with General Lee, I personally informed both Secretary of State Pompeo and White House Chief of Staff Meadows about the call, among other topics.
So did that happen?
I think the disconnect here, Megyn, is the subject, what was actually said. I haven't seen General Milley knock down what Woodward and Costa wrote. Having said that, I know Woodward and Costa well enough to know that you should take everything they write with an enormous grain of salt. The fact that General Milley chose to speak with him, the fact that General Milley chose to speak with him at such great length, I find deeply troubling. But in any event, someone needs to explain what's the disconnect. I heard what General Milley said he actually talked about on the call with his Chinese counterparts, and I've read what has been reportedly going to be in this book. Those aren't remotely the same, and I think that's what it gets to. I have no recollection of General Milley briefing me in the way that he described, but if he said, hey, I spoke with my Chinese counterparts yesterday, that wouldn't have been something particularly memorable. It would have been relatively ordinary course. I spoke with my Chinese counterparts from time to time as well. Every senior leader in America would do that, but it's the substance, Megyn. This is what you got to. And what I saw some of the questions about yesterday, if he in fact said, we will not attack you until we warn you, that's just nutty, right? That's just...
You would remember that.
It's certain that he did not tell Chief Meadows or I that, because I don't know if he told us, he thinks he told us on the same phone call, but I can promise you that Chief Meadows would have called me immediately and said, hey, we had a real problem here. And if I'd have heard it, I would have gone high and right. I'd be very surprised if that's precisely how General Milley told the Chinese that. I've worked with General Milley enough. But if he told Woodward and Costa that he said that, this is something he has to account for. That would be deeply inconsistent with his responsibilities, the senior military defense advisor to the President of the United States. And it would make no tactical, operational, or strategic sense to tell the Chinese that, because in the end, it wasn't going to be how we rolled. It wasn't how the Trump administration rolled. We didn't warn our adversaries. We didn't tell them that there would be a date certain we'd leave Afghanistan. We were very clear we were going to use American power to protect America's interests, and we weren't about warning our adversaries of a potential attack if it was inconsistent with our objectives.
On Afghanistan, we had a date of May 1st, but we said it was conditions-based. But let me stay on Milley and this call for 1 second. He did get into what specifically he said. Yesterday, when we did this broadcast, he had not yet been specifically asked, like, okay, well, what did you say?
Right.
Later in the day, he was asked that. This is soundbite number 2. Let's listen to it.
You said you were, quote, certain that President Trump did not intend on attacking China. That's what you just said.
That's correct.
Yet you're quoted in the Woodward book as telling the top Chinese communist military commander, quote, if we're going to attack, I'm going to call you ahead of time. Is that true, General Milley?
Well, let me tell you what I actually said.
Well, that's not true. I hope that's
Let me tell you what I actually said, Senator. What I said, if there's going to be a war, if there's going to be an attack, there's going to be a lot of calls and tension ahead of time.
But what you're going to get called. Your testimony was that you were certain President Trump would not attack. That's your testimony this morning.
That is true. That is absolutely
then why would
true.
you?
And I was communicating to my Chinese counterpart on instructions, by the way, to de-escalate the situation. And I told him that we are not going to attack. President Trump has no intent to attack. And I told him that repeatedly. And I told him if there was going to be an attack, there'll be plenty of communications going back and forth. Your intel systems are going to pick it up. I said, I'll probably call you. Everybody will be calling you. We're not going to attack you. Just settle down. It's not going to happen. And I did it twice, in October and January.
I think if you're giving a heads up to the Chinese Communist Party.
I didn't give them a heads up we're going to attack because we weren't going to attack.
If we're going to attack, I'm going to call you ahead of time.
Which was being faithful to the President of the United States' intent.
He says that he told him, I'll probably call you. I don't know. You tell me. My read of that as a journalist is that's a general under fire inserting words like probably as hedges. It's pretty damn close to what Woodward put in the book.
I agree. That's pretty darn close to what's in the book. Megyn, let me just give a bit of background. It is not unheard of for senior U.S. officials to make very clear what our red lines are. If you do X, we'll do Y. Right? You want your adversaries to know that. If you learn that your adversaries think, oh my goodness, there's something going on, and they are prepared to counteract, and you think they've got it wrong, this is what you have red phones for, right? Since you were a student of the Cold War, right? This is why you have the red line, to make absolutely crystal clear what the reality of the situation is. Those red phones are not used with the intention of giving your adversaries notice or providing them warning or providing them a guarantee, which is what General Milley's comments were dangerously close to, giving them a guarantee that says, look, I promise you we won't attack until we've given you an idea of exactly what that's going to look like. That is deeply troubling. We want to make sure that we are crystal clear. We don't want accidental wars. We don't want accidental conflicts. We don't want ships at sea to collide with each other accidentally. Those are worthy efforts to engage in your counterparts, but it is always with the idea that you're protecting America's interests. Indeed, most importantly, you're preserving your president's freedom to act in a way he needs to without giving anyone any notice or anyone any advance warning. And I think General Milley, in his response yesterday, came dangerously close to crossing that very line.
What should happen to him, if anything?
I will say this. The fact that he spoke at such length with Woodward is inconsistent with his duties as a general of the United States Army.
So should he resign?
I always leave those questions to the individual. I must say, General Milley, it appears to me that General Milley behaved in a way that is deeply inconsistent with the things that I learned when I was a young cadet, and that in my 5 years of active duty service, I would not be talking to reporters about conversations that I had with the chief rival for the United States of America to a reporter like Bob Woodward. The only objective there, Megyn, that I can identify, the only reason I can actually think General Milley would have done that was to protect himself. It was a political act. It was to tell his version of events. And last thing to say here, Megyn, and we haven't touched on this, this is important. All the stuff that I've read about these top lines on the Woodward story have as their predicate that on whatever this was, January 8th or December 31st, that there was this craziness going on and that there was this real risk in the world. And Woodward is capturing that in the conversations that General Milley had. So the point of Woodward's book is, look what Milley had to do to stop President Trump. I want to tell everyone who's listening to this, that was just simply not the case. I saw no evidence of this. There was no need for General Milley to be the guy who said, yes, Speaker Pelosi, I'm going to make sure there's no nuclear weapon launch. I'm going to make sure we don't start a war, I've heard, with Iran or with China. I have to tell you that that's not what I saw. I was in nearly every meeting with the president, not only for the entire 4 years, but in those weeks leading up to the transition to President Biden. The whole predicate, the whole case that General Milley, I think, was trying to shape and tell a story about is just fundamentally false.